This is, by the way, not specifically his. I'm interpreting how he thinks, and I spoke to some sources close to him who said, he's not going to go for this, right? Like, this is not fair for him and for his reputation. And just to bring you guys up to speed, this is the story that's breaking today. Dan Bongino and Kash Patel were put out there, and they were told that, or maybe they weren't told, I don't know, but they had to carry a certain party line. And we saw them with Mario Bartiromo actually saying, there's no there there. And I think it caused a lot of people to kind of stop and wonder, what is this really about? And then after they told us we were going to get this tape, remember the tape that we did get? It turned out there was a missing moment or a missing minute in the tape. And that's all causing additional concerns right now. So at this moment in time, I would not be surprised if Dan Bongino decided not to come back to work on Monday. Here's CNN reporting the story. We have more on this.
All right, this breaking news. Sources tell CNN that Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino has told people that he's considering resigning amid a major clash between the FBI and DOJ over the continued fallout from the release or lack thereof of the Jeffrey Epstein memo. Joining us right now in files, joining us right now on the phone is CNN anchor and chief White House correspondent Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, what more are you learning?
It remains to be seen if he actually follows through with what he has told colleagues. But what we do know is that Dan Bongino has told people he is considering resigning as the deputy director of the FBI over the fallout that has continued ever since this memo was released last Sunday. The anger inside the MAGA base has only continued to grow instead of going away, as some officials inside hoped it would. And now our colleagues, along with Christian Holmes, Tanner Rabinowitz, and Evan Perez, we're hearing that he's considering resigning after they had this heated confrontation with the Attorney General Pam Bondi over the handling of this earlier this week. And basically there was a meeting at the White House where the FBI Director Kash Patel was there, the White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. They were questioned about whether they were part of a story, that there was basically some infighting over how this came out, and this memo that said we're not going to be releasing any more information related to Jeffrey Epstein. And I should note that we are told Bongino denied leaking any story to this outlet that it was reported on. But there has been a lot of fighting between Attorney General Pam Bondi specifically and the leadership over at the FBI over who's to blame in this situation. I think the context here is obviously Dan Bongino, Kash Patel. They came from this MAGA world where they themselves had pushed a lot of questions about the so-called client list that Epstein had beforehand. And now the MAGA base is just not pleased or satisfied with what they've said in this memo that came out unsigned from the Justice Department and the FBI on Sunday night. So what we are told is Dan Bongino did not show up to work today, that he is essentially not there out of protest. But whether or not he actually follows through on this still remains to be seen. We're still reporting that out. But it just speaks to the backlash that the White House is very much feeling and understanding after this memo came out, despite Trump the other day in the cabinet room asking, who still cares about this? One thing we know is the MAGA base certainly does.
Yeah.
All right, Caitlin Collins. Thanks
okay,
so much
so just to add a little bit more perspective, knowing what I know about some of the personalities here. So Dan, I think if before he saw whatever files he saw, was pretty darn convinced. And you can go back and you can watch a show, and he was very convinced that there was some stuff there, right? And it certainly seemed that way. I mean, consider the fact that Pam Bondi was on Fox saying, hey, we got the list. I got the list. It's sitting right there on my desk. What the heck was she doing if she didn't have the list, lady? Like, do you not read before you go on Fox and say this?
DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
Not yet.
Sun rooftop, digging in the scene with the gangster leaning up, and we ain't coming down. town, baby.
I moved out the hood to have the church on the corner where I sit and talk shit all day cause I wanna. And on top of that, bustin' none of y'all gonna do nothing but keep running your mouth and keep frontin'. Go ahead and say something. I'll wait. I ain't gonna wait too late, cause in a minute I'm escape. Cause there is no debate. No, it's not an option. You gotta keep cock watch.
Sunrooftop, digging in the scene with the gangster leaning up. And we ain't coming down. See on my face that smile. See on my.
Yeah, that's hard. Yo, Cam. Tell them where we from, baby.
I'm from 140th and Lenox. I'm from NFL. Up the block is 40 Wolves. Lou Simpson's on 142nd Cross Square. D. Fergo number 8th Avenue. I don't see you around none of this. Not from none of that.
Yeah. But they heard you say all that, but they ain't get to the point.
That if you didn't have strong dudes around him, you'd have had cats like the Lynch Mob. You'd have had cats like Preacher. You would have had cats like the 40 Wolves. You would have cats like Niggas for Life. Dudes who was really in the streets like that.
Facts. Yeah.
Now if you follow me, I will follow you too. Now if you follow me, then I will follow you too.
Hey.
Go all the way, all the way. D-block, baby, I'm back and I'm boss. And I'm muffin' that sauce. I'm getting money of course, but I'm never ever think of taking a loss. Shorty sipping that crystal. So shorty started buck wild. Shorty back and buck wild. So you know niggas dicks out. She taking them down. All the way down. She be taking them down. Go all the way, all the way.
Yeah. With that being said, let's get into this.
I was always the outsider.
Oh, well, that's where I want to go next,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
what I notice a pattern with New York City politics is
The price is $9,818. The price is $9,818 per XRP and has been confirmed by the largest financial institution in the world, Wells Fargo, which approved XRP for payments as 650 trillion real estate injection will commence.
And this is due to a lot of key factors, like, for example, Ripple to integrate the XRP ledger within the United States banking system. That is in addition to Ripple officially registering to become a national bank that uses XRP, and the ProShares XRP ETF trading to officially begin going live next week. But what is really about to take XRP to a whole new level, and that is $9,818 per XRP, is the $650 trillion that will commence in literal weeks. But they're hiding it from you. They want you to sell all your XRP before this massive breakout. In fact, we partner with Uphold that allows you to actually get more XRP, and they're giving every single person that uses my link in the description, likes the video, subscribes, shares this video, and then signs up on Uphold using my link in the description and the transaction, any amount, $1 penny, $1, $10, you're going to get up to $100 worth of free XRP. So this is a juicy way to get free money, free XRP, which could be valued in the hundreds of thousands of dollars by spending less than 5 minutes of your time. So again, it's literally free money. I definitely recommend it, specifically at the critical time that we're in now, where XRP might go from $2.78 to over $10,000. So with that being said, all this will be in the description, and let's get right into the video. So XRP is $2.81 after its massive breakout earlier today that made it skyrocket over 28%. In fact, XRP did something so massive that it surpassed both Tether, Binance, and Solana, becoming the third largest cryptocurrency following Bitcoin and Ethereum. And even, and this is the crazy part, is Ripple's CEO believes it could reach over $9,818 as he states that XRP is the next Bitcoin. Crazy enough, this is similar to what Forbes had stated in one of their articles, where the title of the article was highlighted that XRP is the next Bitcoin and it's heading to $59,472. This is where we're at, and I want you guys to listen closely to this clip because it's critical, specifically when you see institutions like Forbes or Wells Fargo or multiple Wall Street analysts predicting prices per XRP over $10,000. And now Bitcoin is going to be behind XRP. This is what Ripple's own CEO, Brad Garlinghouse, stated. Let's roll the clip.
Ripple could be the next Bitcoin?
Well, I think if we're solving a real problem and it's at scale, then I think it's a compliment. I think the most important thing that is going on in crypto is understanding what is real and what is just hype. Some, I think, may look back on Bitcoin and find that it was the Napster of digital assets. What I mean by that is Napster was the first to digitize music and demonstrate, hey, if you digitize music, you can do a lot of cool things with that. But ultimately, they were circumventing trademark laws, they were circumventing royalty payments, and government stepped in, and Napster was not successful. But Spotify, iTunes, Pandora, they were very successful. I think what you'll find is that maybe the next generation of digital assets ends up solving some of the original problems that Bitcoin set out to solve. Is XRP the next Bitcoin? If we work with the system to solve this problem, and we can solve that problem at scale, a problem measured in the trillions of dollars, then there's a lot of opportunity to create value in XRP.
I have an executive order for your attention relating actually to government payments. Historically, checks issued by the Treasury are, I believe, 14 times more likely to become the subject of fraud than electronic transfer payments. This is an executive order that's going to push the Treasury Department to modernize its payment system to ensure that where possible they're using electronic methods of payment as opposed to paper checks in order to reduce waste, fraud, and abuse in the government, which is obviously an endeavor that we've been pursuing in numerous aspects of government under your leadership.
It's basically modernization of equipment and methods, and it's something that really I think he's going to be a great Secretary of the Treasury wanted, Scott. And so we're doing this, and we have other modernization programs going on. We could let somebody else, whoever's next, whoever that may be, do it, but it's something that should have been done 25, 30 years ago. Okay.
So you guys seen Ripple CEO, and you've also seen the next clip, which is Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, saying that he's signing an executive order to revitalize and modernize the payment system of the Federal Reserve, which now is speculated that it will use the XRP ledger, and they have partnered with Ripple Labs. In fact, Ripple's own CEO highlighted the fact that, again, they're going to surpass SWIFT, they're going to replace Ethereum, and that they're heading for the #1 spot to even surpass Bitcoin. But all of this is coming through one key thing, and that is RealFi, which is going to inject 654.39 trillion USD onto the XRP ledger. And this announcement, a major unfolding of 650 trillion, will commence on July 21st. RealFi will unveil a foundational advancement towards aligning the global real estate market with the XRP ledger of $654 trillion. And all of this is going to flow through the Real token, which is the native token of RealFi, and it's built on the XRP ledger. Now, this is huge, and in the next 120 hours, something massive is also about to unfold. So you're about to have two massive announcements in 2 weeks. 120 hours remain until Real token supply burn, and this is on the XRP ledger. XRP and Real could experience major price moves. On July 15th, so in less than 124 hours now, there's about 3 days left, so about 72 hours. July 15th, the total of 10% of the total Real token supply is set to be burned, effectively decreasing the available supply and boosting scarcity ahead of upcoming phases. Given the anticipated spike in transaction activities during the burn, the team has made preparations in case of price glitches involving both Real token and XRP. Huge news right there that needs to be set in stone. XRP and Real token will experience massive price glitches, potentially making them reach 1, 2, 300x their current price. This truthfully would not be a shock. And I mean, this is very soon, the massive supply. Now, the Real token doesn't have much supply left, I think 58 million. So easily, we're talking, we could see the Real token price go from, let's take a look at their current price, 1.8 cents, so almost 2 cents, to instantly in the thousands of dollars. I mean, there's some analysts saying that it could go overnight from 0.018 cents, almost 2 cents, to over $64,500 at least, because of the fact that if like 0.5% or 1% of the total 650 trillion that it's going to facilitate comes through the Real token, jumps from with the XRP ledger, which we're expecting 650, but let's just say 0.5% of that, it would easily skyrocket because it has a very, very low supply compared to something like XRP, which is 100 billion. Real token, I think, only has like 58 million phase 1 supply. So really, its supply is absolutely nothing. And if you take a look at this, guys, there's very nice support levels, very low resistance. I mean, this thing could easily fly up, go to those, couple $100 in minutes, or maybe even thousands of dollars. But again, we're talking about $60,000 with 0.5% to 1% of the 600 trillion actually flowing through the Real token. And imagine the price of XRP at that point. But XRP is going to be 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. This is going to be $60,000, and it's going to be on the XRP ledger. And guys, one thing that is extremely important to realize is look at this chart, guys. Look at this chart. This thing went parabolic. It did a massive vertical, hit a massive peak, did a retracement, but now we are about to see another massive breakout. So, when something goes up 500,000-600,000%, it's expected that it's going to retrace, consolidate, which it's doing, and now it's about to see another major breakout. On top of this, look at this, guys. This thing received a great score. I mean, 100% by next score, low risk. Total wallets are about, I think, 1,750, which is insane. And this has only been on for weeks, guys. Imagine. People have not seen it. It's not yet listed on any centralized exchange. It's only on the XRP ledger. So just imagine the price. Guys, I'll be leaving all the links down below in the description. It's also backed by a massive institution, RealFi, which is a real estate payment solution, and it uses the Real token. So I'll be leaving all links down below in the description, payrollfi.com. Everything will be down below. You can even see which decentralized exchanges that it's listed on, so you guys can capture some if you want to. But again, all financial advice is non-financial advice, and you definitely should always do your own research. All right, guys, I'm going to end the video here, so if you guys enjoy it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time, and peace.
President Trump doubling down on his America First trade agenda, announcing an impending 35% tariff on Canada.
beginning August 1st, unless Canada curbs its high tariff on U.S. dairy farmers and cuts the flow of fentanyl across the northern borders. But Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney posted on X that Canada is already making progress on fentanyl. He says Ottawa remains committed to working with the United States. All of this on the heels of a wave of new tariff announcements this week on 8 other countries that President Trump says are undercutting U.S. industry. The president says the goal is clear: bring jobs and investment back home to America.
We've taken in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs, hundreds of billions, and we haven't even started yet. These are wealthy countries, and they or their companies will come into our country and build, and that's what's actually happening. If you had a very low tariff, there'd be no incentive to do that.
Joining me now, White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Kevin, it's great to have you this weekend. Thank you so much for being here. I like what the president just said. If we didn't have tariffs, there would be no incentive to get their supply chains into America. That is so critical. Is that the real priority here, to ensure that America has a supply chain and we are not so reliant on communist China, a clear adversary?
Absolutely, Maria. You said it very, very well. But really, I could think that the president has 2 priorities. The first priority is what you just said about making sure that we never again face a world where a foreign government could potentially upset our supply chain in a way that would shut down American industry. But the other thing is that I think it's more interesting to me is that he has convinced the American people correctly that they're better off if they buy American. If they buy American, they're going to get a better product. If they buy American, they're going to help the communities around them. They're going to help their friends and neighbors who have jobs. And so I think that we're seeing a big shift in demand from Americans for American products. And you see it best in the data. Of course, that's the best place to see stuff. The CEA put out a report this week, as you know, that said that the prices of imported goods into the U.S. have actually gone down, despite the fact that we've raised hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs. I think the best explanation for that is people are beginning to recognize the harm that happens when other countries dump their stuff in the U.S. and put Americans out of work. And so I think that one of the reasons why you're seeing the letters and the president raising the rates and putting more pressure on getting better deals than he's seen is that we've put a lot of tariffs in place already, and the results have been fantastic.
Yeah. And not to mention all these hundreds of billions that you're taking in terms of tariffs. I saw that the Washington Examiner this week reported that for the first time since 2005, the federal budget posted a surplus. That's a big deal, given what President Trump just said, that you're taking in, what, $100 billion this year, or hundreds of billions of dollars overall in tariff revenue?
Right. The CBO outlook that we got just a couple of weeks ago before the big, beautiful bill was voted on says that with current policies, we're looking at about $3 trillion in tariff revenue over the next 10 years. And so we're definitely on a path to completely revise the way the American fiscal system works. And I'd add one other thing about the way people cover this. A lot of people are like, why are you mad at Canada? Why are you mad at these guys? Why are you mad at those guys? Now, for sure, there have been some countries that have been dumping things in the U.S. in a very harmful way. But in the end, what President's doing is putting America first. These tariffs are an America first policy. It's really about us more than it's about them. We're going to have a much more efficient tax code, a much bigger, faster, better economy because of the complete portfolio of policies that the President's putting into place.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. But again, companies are complaining that they don't have clarity. So, today it's Canada. Next week, it could be China again. And China is threatening retaliation over President Trump's tariffs. They say if they're reinstated, China is warning that other countries that they will, quote, respond resolutely if any trade deals are made at Beijing's expense, and if the Beijing supply chain is not at the center.
Well, I think that the clarity is very clearly, there's a date on it. The president has made it clear that in early August, that's it. We're either going to have deals or we're going to have the tariffs that he put into the letters. And that puts a lot of pressure on everybody to come to the table one last time and give us everything they got. And I can tell you, I can report that everybody is exactly doing that. And so I would guess that before the August recess, when Congress goes home and everybody starts to celebrate their state fairs and so on, by then I think there'll be a heck of a lot of clarity.
All right. So you think we're going to get most of the important trade deals done by the time Congress leaves for the August recess?
For sure, by the deadline, yeah.
Kevin, President Trump continues to put pressure on Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell to cut interest rates. He even called on him to resign in this week's cabinet meeting. There's growing talk, of course, about you being a contender as the next Federal Reserve Chairman against names like former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh. I know you can't admit or deny right now on any of that, but let's go hypothetical. Hypothetically speaking, if you were the chairman of the Federal Reserve right now, would you be cutting interest rates? What would your policy look like?
Right. Well, again, I'm not going to put the hypothetical out there that I'm Fed chair, but I will talk about Federal Reserve policy. The bottom line is that there are very normal correlations between the policy rates for our major trading partners. Very high correlation between the Central Bank of Europe's policy rate and the American rate. And if you look at the normal relationship between the European rates and the U.S. rate, then the U.S. rate right now would be about 1.5% lower than it is. And so you have to ask yourself, why is it that the normal correlations that we've seen over and over again for many years between the actions of the central banks have broken down precisely now? And you don't really have to wonder about it. It's because the central bank has been out there saying that the tariffs are going to be inflationary. They've been saying that since really President Trump took office. But as you and I just discussed, the tariffs have not been inflationary, just as I gave the economic intuition for months ago when we talked about how we think that the Chinese are going to eat most of the tariffs. And so the bottom line is they've got a failed observation about why they think they need to be worried about inflation. The data have spoken against them, and they're now way, way out of whack. They're an outlier in global financial policy. And so I think there's plenty of room for the Fed to correct that.
I spoke with the president recently and asked him about this $9 trillion in debt that is rolling over this year.
Right.
And what the president told me was the fact that he needs lower interest rates in order to roll that over effectively. So do you think, as chairman of the Fed, Jay Powell should be thinking about the cost that it takes to carry the debt that we do? I mean, the cost in our interest right now, just on the $37 trillion in debt, is $1 trillion, more than we spend on defense. So should that be something that the Fed chairman thinks about in terms of where he makes monetary policy?
Absolutely. He needs to have a very clear model of how the economy works and how everything interacts with everything else. And the bottom line is that I don't think that there is a sensible model that one could concoct that's consistent with the policies that we're seeing. It's very, very easy to see that inflation right now is lower than it's been by any measure for more than 4 years, that economic activity is picking up because of a huge increase in supply. Normally, when there's a big positive supply shock because of stuff like the big, beautiful bill and deregulation, that puts downward pressure on prices. It takes the pressure off the Fed. So if you have a sensible economic model, then there's a lot of cause right now for lower interest rates. And I would just say that another thing that I know the president cares a lot about is the fact that the Fed really needs to be transparent. And the Fed needs to say, so, okay, if you're going to say that we think there's going to be a runaway inflation because of tariffs, which I think is inconsistent with economic theory, but suppose you believe that, then show us your work. Show us why do you think that? And then we have a model that we can look at and evaluate over time and say, okay, well, it's time to change your mind now that it's 6 months later and in fact prices have gone down.
Kevin, there's also all this speculation about what he did with this money to upgrade the Federal Reserve headquarters. Because of that, Bill Pulte at the FHFA is asking him to resign. Do you think Jay Powell should resign?
I think that the building is a debacle. It's an absolute debacle. I think that Russ Vought sent a letter detailing all of the cost overruns and the ridiculous features that they've built into the building. And I just can't imagine, why people at the Federal Reserve would have supported such runaway spending. And I do think that if it were me, I'd be pretty ashamed of myself.
All right, we will leave it there. Kevin Hassett, great to see you this weekend. Thank you so much. Kevin Hassett is at the White House.
And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Let's get into more of these top headlines, especially those now still swirling around the disgraced and dead ex-financier Jeffrey Epstein here. I want to put this up. This was first reported in Axios. They got the scoop. It was later confirmed by the DOJ and the FBI, but they reported this a couple of days ago. that President Trump's DOJ and FBI have concluded that they have no evidence that convicted sex offender and disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein blackmailed powerful figures, kept a quote-unquote client list, or was murdered. That's according to a memo detailing the findings obtained by Axios. Now, the administration is releasing also a video in both raw and enhanced versions that it says indicates no one entered the areas of the Manhattan prison where Epstein was held the night he died in 2019. Take a look at some of that video that was released. This is about a 1 minute long snippet of it. Take a look at that. So the video supports a medical examiner's finding that Epstein died by suicide. That's according to the 2-page memo claiming that. Now, Axios says why it matters. The findings represent the first time Trump's administration has officially contradicted conspiracy theories about Epstein's activities and his death, theories that had been pushed by the FBI's top 2 officials before Trump appointed them to the Bureau. That's the FBI Director, Kash Patel, and the Deputy Director of the FBI, Dan Bongino. So, as social media influencers and activists, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino were among those in MAGA world who questioned the official version of how Epstein died. Patel and Bongino have since said Epstein killed himself, but it has become an article of faith online, especially on the right, that Epstein's crimes also implicated government officials, celebrities, and business leaders, and that someone killed him to conceal them. Now, the memo says no one else involved in the Epstein case will be charged. Remember, though, we covered this trial here on Live Now, that Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, she's currently serving a 20-year sentence for child sex trafficking and related offenses as Epstein's accomplice here. Now, one of the major Trump world figures, the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, she is under heavy scrutiny for saying in an appearance on the Fox News channel back in February that that very client list of Epstein's was on her desk, ready for review. This was February 21st. This is what she said. Let's listen.
Releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
Not yet.
Okay, so I know a very short clip there. And remember, today at President Trump's very lengthy cabinet meeting, reporters had the opportunity to ask Attorney General Bondi, who was there, of course, about some of these contradictions here. Let's watch this clip.
Ask the Attorney General a question too, President Trump. Sure. Your memo and release yesterday on Jeffrey Epstein, it left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for a American or foreign intelligence agency. The former labor secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of his death?
Yeah, sure. If
Could I just interrupt for 1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night. And that's it on Epstein.
Okay, so there, the Attorney General's explanation about the minute-long gap in the video they released of the Manhattan Correctional Facility there in New York of the night Epstein died by suicide. And some of these other questions we do want to bring into the conversation, though. Our friend at the Washington Examiner, Kalen Deese, he covers the Department of Justice now each and every day. He joins me. Kalen, good to see you here. I know you've been on this story for quite some time. I got to ask, why is there so much renewed interest in this? And why did the DOJ feel the need now to release this memo? Why now?
Thanks for having me on, Andrew. Well, about a week before this came out, there was actually reporting from the Associated Press that renewed some of the undercover footage that was taken earlier this year of Attorney General Pam Bondi, where she was caught on camera discussing tens of thousands of videos related to the Epstein case. And that caught the attention. That was by the undercover outfit from James O'Keefe. And that was bringing renewed attention because a lot of people had questions about what were these tens of thousands of videos. There had been some recollections in court filings about video files, information like that, but the claim of tens of thousands really caught the attention. And the Attorney General went on and spoke about a week later and clarified that yes, there are tens of thousands of child pornography videos that were involved in the case of Jeffrey Epstein. And so it really renewed the attention, especially as it came around the time that Deputy Attorney General, Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino was going out and giving interviews and saying that Jeffrey Epstein did kill himself. And so it comes as these figures, especially people like Bongino and Director Kash Patel, had been saying for many years before they were in their official duties that there was something to look into about all this. And so it's catching a lot of people, especially in the MAGA world, off guard, because it seems like now when the Trump administration finally has a chance to get the answers out, that they're suddenly giving people nothing. And that's proving to be very frustrating, especially to Trump allies, people like Steve Bannon, people like Tucker Carlson, Laura Loomer, everyone in that category.
I mean, some of those names you just riddled off there, they're calling for Pam Bondi to be fired over this, saying that she didn't deliver the goods, so to speak. So I have to ask, how did the DOJ kind of come to that conclusion? I want to read from some of the memo. It says this, that investigators found, quote, no incriminating client list of Epstein's, no credible evidence that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals, and that no evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties here. And then, just kind of me speaking here, that was always the thing that I noticed, is that there may be guilt by association with some of these high profile names who went to a party with Epstein once or flew on his plane once. That doesn't necessarily mean they would be found guilty in a court of law, right, Kalen?
Yes, precisely. I mean, we know that the former president himself has been mentioned in some of these files that were put forth by the government in years past. It was something that Elon Musk went out and said himself, that Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. Well, what is he referring to? Well, at the very least, it could have been a passing reference to the fact that people like Trump have been named in there, past presidents, princes, people of that sort. But we've never actually seen any evidence to suggest that they were actually complicit in these types of nefarious crimes that Epstein was involved in. In fact, the Justice Department said that there was no evidence that they could find to actually bring a case. And that also complicates this, because the fact is that there was a promise to deliver information, but the Justice Department, I mean, former prosecutors will tell you this all the time, if there was ever anything to actually suggest that someone, of high profile was involved in this, it would first be presented to a grand jury. And that was, something that just wasn't occurring with all this. So I think that this is, in some respect, a classic case, an unfortunate case of a dog that catches the car. And, what do you do from that point? And I think that, the one thing that's very interesting to me is that we've seen consistency now through 3 prior administrations, from the time whenever former Attorney General Bill Barr was having the DOJ investigate this, to the time whenever former Attorney General Merrick Garland, was saying that, there's not too much that we can offer at this point about this. So we're seeing at least some consistency on the part of the DOJ, at least maybe not so in the beginning, because it seemed like everyone was getting hyped up for something bigger that was coming out. But as far as the final conclusions go, what this memo laid out, it seems like the government is trying to make the public say this is a nothing burger. And even, as Donald Trump said, people need to move on. And that's just not satisfying to so many people in this country, especially those who are survivors, victims of sex abuse. It just seems rather shallow, to say the least.
Yeah, Caitlin, to that point, though, I mean, what is the DOJ? What's Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche? What are they doing? This is more of a political question. What are they doing to assuage some of those people who don't buy it, especially those in MAGA world?
Yeah, so I was hearing that there was many frustrations within the White House, particularly about the way that this was handled. Advisors were murmuring that this was a disaster and things of that sort. And the fact of the matter is that they told the public that there was a phase 1. And many people thought that that would include perhaps a phase 2. Perhaps, one could argue this is the phase 2, albeit I would say it doesn't seem like that, especially whenever the phase 1 was materials that were already out there and things that people already knew, and it was handed in binders to a bunch of influencers. And as far as what the DOJ is doing, they're saying that there's footage that people have never seen before, but that it cannot be released because it would be illegal. But I think that one thing that the public and also reporters need to continue to do is to press them on this question. Ask them, there's tens of thousands of videos out there. Is there not a single frame out of that entire pile that doesn't include the abuse materials that would be illegal to show to the public, that would offer any ounce of additional information that would make people feel firm that this is essentially a case that has no other, co-defendants, co-conspirators, things like that? And I think that there's additional lawsuits out there from groups, watchdogs like Judicial Watch, that are seeking additional information from the government. There's also an attorney that's representing a former victim of Jeffrey Epstein that's filed a lawsuit in Washington, D.C., that is seeking additional information. It's actually cited Pam Bondi's comments about these tens of thousands of videos as a means to further ascertain information. These are the means in which the public can demand additional information, although it's worth the caveat that when it comes to requesting information like this, you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell earlier. Her case she's still trying to appeal her case.
Right.
So while there's still ongoing litigation over over her matter, that's something that the government has to take into account in order not to prejudice the defendant,
Sure.
even though she's already been convicted. So there's some information that I think potentially could still come out, although it would be premature and it could jeopardize the cases that remain.
So, Caitlin, just last point on this. Is it the DOJ's standpoint right now that this is closed? Jeffrey Epstein is dead. His main accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, is serving a 20-year sentence. Is that their approach that they're taking right now? Is that the line?
The Justice Department has given every indication, and at this point, as early as this week, that we're not going to see any other information coming out. And I think that that is going to be something that, from a political standpoint, could bite the Trump administration going forward, depending on whether or not this becomes a more bipartisan issue.
Okay.
As far as I'm aware, it seems like both sides of the political spectrum all have questions concerning Jeffrey Epstein, and it'll be very interesting to see whether Trump's base is able to put this aside or if they'll keep demanding more answers.
And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Gorgeous Live Now picture there over Los Angeles. And earlier today, that's where we learned that, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office there for the Central District of California, an illegal immigrant from Guatemala has now been arrested on a 4-count indictment, alleging he led one of the largest human smuggling organizations in the United States, a ring that smuggled approximately 20,000 illegal immigrants from Guatemala to destinations nationwide over a 5-year span. Fox News correspondent Alicia Acuna on this story.
Organization caused deaths.
Federal authorities in Los Angeles announced the takedown of a Guatemalan criminal organization responsible for one of the largest human smuggling operations in the United States. On Friday, agents arrested Eduardo Domingo Renoch Matul and Cristobal Mejia Chay, both illegal immigrants from Guatemala, for allegedly moving more than 20,000 migrants into the U.S. since 2019. The Border Patrol says agents noticed illegal Guatemalan immigrants being transported with large amounts of cash.
This was more than just a regional smuggling organization. This was a complex, coast-to-coast smuggling organization.
Authorities say the group charged migrants up to $18,000 to get from Guatemala to the Arizona border. The smugglers would then hold the migrants in stash houses in Phoenix and Los Angeles before relocating them around the country, often keeping migrants hostage for months in this LA neighborhood if they didn't pay the transport fees. Also charged, Jose Pastor Oxley, who was already behind bars for killing 7 immigrants, including 3 children, in a 2023 car crash in Oklahoma that happened during a transport from New York to Los Angeles. Another suspect, Elmer Obispo Hernandez, is on the run after authorities say he threatened to kill a federal agent.
While search warrants were being executed in Los Angeles on Friday, he telephoned a member of the investigative team and threatened to kill that agent and his family members by cutting off their heads.
The 3 suspects in custody are being held without bond and face the death penalty if convicted. In Denver, Alicia Acuna, Fox News.
Alicia, thanks so much. In the meantime here, we want to listen to a little bit more of this press conference today with the U.S. Attorney there for the Central District of California announcing these arrests and what went into bringing these people into custody. Let's watch.
Good morning. My name is Joe McNally. I'm the acting United States Attorney here in Los Angeles. I'm joined by my partners in federal law enforcement from Homeland Security Investigations and the United States Border Patrol, Deputy Special Agent in Charge Dwayne Engelbrecht, and Greg Bavino, Chief of the El Centro sector of the Border Patrol. I'm here to announce an indictment charging 4 defendants with operating one of the largest human smuggling rings in the nation. The indictment alleges a transnational criminal organization smuggled approximately 20,000 illegal immigrants from Guatemala to the United States via Mexico, and then transported these aliens to cities throughout the United States. The offenses alleged in the indictment show a criminal group that acted with callous disregard for our nation's immigration laws and no regard for the immigrants that they smuggled. They held individuals smuggled hostage for months, threatened them and their family members with violence, and others, including children, were killed in a horrific car crash in Oklahoma in 2023. The indictment charges 4 defendants, all of whom are illegal aliens from Guatemala who committed crimes while living in the United States. Each defendant faces up to life imprisonment and the possibility of the death penalty. Their crimes include conspiring to transport and harbor illegal aliens for private financial gain, which, as I mentioned, at least in one instance, resulted in death. The ringleader, Eduardo Domingo Renojo Matel, was arrested and arraigned on Friday along with his right-hand man, Mahia Cha. Both defendants have pleaded not guilty, and a trial date is being set. Another defendant, Helmer Obispo Hernandez, is a fugitive. He's pictured here. In addition to the charges in the indictment, he's also charged in a federal criminal complaint with threatening to kill a federal law enforcement officer. While search warrants were being executed in Los Angeles on Friday, he telephoned a member of the investigative team and threatened to kill that agent and his family members by cutting off their heads. Those actions demonstrate just how violent this organization is. A fourth defendant is in custody in Oklahoma in connection with the fatal car accident in 2023. The transnational criminal organization operated for at least a dozen years and specialized in smuggling illegal immigrants from Guatemala to the United States. The movement of those illegal immigrants within the United States, especially between Phoenix and Los Angeles, and the harboring of those illegal aliens in the United States. According to the indictment, associates of the organization in Guatemala solicited thousands of illegal immigrants to come to the United States. Those associates then accepted payment between $15,000 and $18,000 for each smuggled alien to come to the United States via Mexico. They coordinated the movement from Guatemala to the United States. Mexican smuggling organizations transported the illegal immigrants from Mexico into the United States, initially to Arizona. Once the illegal immigrants were in the United States, they held them at stash houses, where they were later picked up by the organization's lieutenants. The illegal immigrants then, for an additional fee, were transported and moved to various stash houses throughout the United States, including Los Angeles. Those who did not pay their fees were held hostage, including at a stash house here in the Westlake district of Los Angeles. This organization caused deaths. In November 2023, while transporting illegal immigrants, defendant Jose Paxtor Ola caused a car accident in Elk City, Oklahoma, where he was transporting people illegally. That car accident resulted in 7 deaths. 3 of those individuals are minors, including a 4-year-old child. The actions of this human smuggling organization demonstrates a complete disregard for the nation's immigration laws. As the Attorney General has said, we are doubling down on our efforts to enforce long-standing criminal immigration laws. The failure to enforce those laws fuels these criminal organizations. I thank Homeland Security Investigations, the United States Border Patrol, the Inglewood Police Department for their diligent efforts investigating this dangerous and violent criminal organization. I also thank our prosecutors, Sean Nelson and Elia Herrera, for their work ensuring that these charges were brought and this organization dismantled. The human smuggling case that I've spoken about was part of a week-long series of events focused on revitalizing existing immigration enforcement activities, which include cases in which illegal immigrants were victimized, other cases where people here illegally exploited the nation's immigration laws, and dozens of criminal complaints this week were filed against illegal aliens with criminal records who had been removed from the United States after felony convictions and then returned. These included individuals convicted of violent crimes like manslaughter, assaults on police officers, and drug trafficking. This area of criminal activity is a priority, top priority for the Department of Justice, and our efforts to target individuals participating in criminal activity here will continue. I'll now turn it over to the Deputy Special Agent Charge from Homeland Security.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about an important investigation that was run by ICE, Homeland Security Investigations, and Border Patrol, and prosecuted by U.S. Attorney's offices in the Central District. This investigation targeted a prolific human smuggling organization that was responsible for moving roughly 20,000 immigrants into the United States. As mentioned previously, this investigation also resulted in the death of 7 migrants as they were transporting east into the interior United States, including a 4-year-old child. The organization would typically bring in their clients into the Los Angeles and Phoenix area and transport their money into bank accounts, laundering those funds and depositing those into Los Angeles-based financial institutions for banks in the region. Human smuggling is a grave and dangerous endeavor that people who are mostly desperate and looking for a better life engage in, not realizing the possible dangers and the end results, which sometimes involve trafficking, exploitation, coercion, and long enduring trials and tribulations to get to their end destination. The illegal activity not only endangers their lives of those being smuggled, but also the national security and public safety. We work with our partners, U.S. Border Patrol, state and locals, and the U.S. Attorney's Office to ensure that people who bring these endangered individuals into the United States who are just looking for a better life to justice, especially in instances where, as in this, life has been lost. It's important for us to get a message out to the public to ensure that information is being provided to ICE, Homeland Security Investigations, to Border Patrol, and our partners so that we can combat these crimes as they're happening. We ask for the public's assistance in calling us at 1-866-347-2423 with any information that you may have regarding smuggling organizations and human trafficking organizations that are exploiting the vulnerable in this society. Thank you. Yes, last name is Angegbrand. Dwayne, D-W-A-Y-N-E. Thank you.
We'll now turn it over to Chief Greg Bovino, Chief Border Patrol El Centro Sector. Chief.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. Again, my name is Gregory Bovino. I'm the Chief Patrol Agent of the premier sector in the U.S. Border Patrol, the El Centro Sector. I'd like to thank Joe McNally, Acting United States Attorney Central District, Homeland Security Investigations, as well as allied law enforcement agencies who all took part in the important takedown of this Turco transnational criminal organization. Border Patrol specifically provided approximately 50 agents this past Friday for this takedown. Those 50 agents were from 3 different sectors: the San Diego sector, the Yuma sector, and the El Centro sector, primarily from our Special Operations Detachment, which includes BORTAC, the Border Patrol Tactical Unit, BORSTAR, the Border Patrol Search, Trauma, and Rescue Teams, as well as our Sector Intelligence Unit, K-9 teams, and our Strategic Communications. This Turco organization, as you've already heard, is very dangerous, very prolific organization. 2021 was the first year that Border Patrol agents came into contact with this transnational criminal threat. Those were agents from our Indio station on Interstate 10 noticed a unique phenomenon of Guatemalan illegal aliens being transported westbound from points in New Mexico and Arizona. Further investigation revealed through eastbound stops with large amounts of cash and illegal aliens that this was more than just a regional smuggling organization. This was a complex coast-to-coast smuggling organization, a coast-to-coast organization. At that time, our partners from Homeland Security Investigations joined us in this investigation, as well as the United States Attorney's Office here in Central District. And in the ensuing years, a lot of good work was accomplished by all parties involved, resulting in that takedown this past Friday. I'll close by saying that border security is created. Let me say that again. Border security is created. It doesn't just happen. It's created through innovation, forward thinking, and moving the ball down the field. This Turco organization was destroyed, dismantled, top to bottom this past Friday. And that's what we're after here. That is what we are after here. With our partners at HSI, U.S. Attorney's Office, and all other law enforcement agencies, one of the most complex, far-ranging, far-reaching smuggling organizations is now out of business. On behalf of the men and women of the United States Border Patrol, it's time to turn and burn. Turn and burn. We're turning and burning onto that next target. As soon as we leave this conference room, we're on to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'll now take questions. Yes, sir.
So you said that they are responsible for transporting over 20,000 migrants. Can you tell us how you arrived at that figure and how much time did it take them to smuggle that many people into the United States?
So the organization had been operating for more than a decade based on information that we found during search warrants and other parts of the investigation. The 20,000 number is based on material that we seized during a search warrant. Trafficking organizations, just like any criminal enterprise, oftentimes tracks and keeps business records. And we found records showing a little more than 20,000 individuals being smuggled to the United States. I think it was around 20,800, so approximately 20,000 based on material that we found during the course of the search warrants.
May I ask you a couple of questions about the Oklahoma crash? Were all the victims in the vehicle? Was it a result of a DUI, and was it a result of them being chased by ICE?
Yeah, I'll refer you to the indictment. It was not a result of them being chased by ICE. It was an accident that resulted during smuggling, and all of the victims were in the vehicle. Yes.
Was this Guatemalan man the one that you caught on last Friday in a 41 Street in Avalon?
So the individual here, Obispo Hernandez, is a fugitive and unknown where he is, whether that's in the United States or Guatemala, but he's a fugitive. He was not one of the individuals arrested. He is the individual who, during the execution of search warrants on Friday, telephoned one of the investigators from Homeland Security, one of the agents working on the case, and said that he was going to kill that agent and kill that agent's family members, including his children, by cutting off their heads. That was Mr. Hernandez.
Do you have an idea if this man is related to the one that he was arrested on Friday on Avalon and 41st Street?
I don't know the relationship between that individual and Obispo Hernandez. Are there questions?
A couple things. I just want to make sure I'm clear. So the 20,000 people who were smuggled in and essentially victims of this group into the U.S., over what time frame was that again? I want to make sure I'm clear.
I think it's roughly a decade period. Well, let me break it out. I can tell you that the organization operated for roughly a decade. The exact time period of what those 20,000 victims covers, I don't know. I don't know the exact time period.
And you had said that they would take money from people and put it in bank accounts. Roughly how much money are we talking about?
Well, $15,000 to $18,000 was what was charged for every individual who was smuggled into the United States. As I said, individuals would then be held sometimes at a stash house. If they were not, their fees were not paid. They were held hostage, sometimes for months at a time. There was violence threatened against family members, often down in Guatemala. They would tell the individual at the stash house that, we're going to harm your family in Guatemala if you don't pay. And obviously, they also, the actions resulted in the deaths of 7 individuals, including a 4-year-old child. Yes.
Question, of the 20,000 individuals, approximately what percentage were women?
I don't have that information. I can, we can find that for you.
And was this a cartel related? I mean, I'm assuming it was, but I want to put it out there. I mean, the cartels are being extremely violent like this.
Yeah, look, what I can say is as a general matter, smuggling organizations smuggle all kinds of things, as you know, not just humans. They do drugs. They use those same supply chains. And in order to exist in Mexico and in Guatemala, you have to have very significant criminal partnerships and ties to cartels in order to be able to operate as a general matter. Yes?
Can you speak on what makes these defendants eligible for the death penalty and what your thoughts on that is?
Yeah, they are death eligible because their actions here, smuggling for private financial gain, resulted in the deaths of individuals, and so the statute includes a statute that includes a potential death penalty.
Sir, when you were talking about cartels, are you talking about the Sinaloa cartel or cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación?
I'm talking as a general matter that human smuggling organizations only thrive when they form partnerships and work with cartels. But for that, they're not going to be able to operate and engage in the type and scope of criminal conduct that you've seen in the indictment. One more question? Somebody who hasn't had a chance to ask one?
Okay, I have a question for the HSI.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's mind-boggling to think that only 4 people are responsible for such a large number of people being smuggled across the country. Are you looking for other suspects other than these 4 guys that you already have zeroed into this criminal activity?
So we've gone after, with this indictment, the leadership, and the reason that we've done that is that's the most efficient and effective way to quickly dismantle it. I will tell you that the investigation remains ongoing. In order for an organization like this to operate, it requires criminal partners, not just in the United States, but in Guatemala, who are recruiting the people and then threatening violence when fees aren't paid. It requires criminal partners in Mexico, and our investigation into this group's activity continues. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Say today, there's no question that there were critical failures during the Butler event. It is important that we learn how and why this security failure occurred so that we can better provide safety and security to those high-ranking officials and the general public in the future. I truly believe Americans deserve that. Thank you for your opportunity to testify before you today. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. This forum having come to order, I want to remind everyone that we will be going in 10-minute segments. Should there be a need to have a second round of questioning, we will then limit that second round of questioning to 5 minutes each. The first person who will start this out is the Honorable Andy Biggs.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody for being here today. Tonight, showing the moment Donald Trump's would-be assassin climbed onto the roof of that building just 2 minutes before he opened fire. Yeah, look, there he is. You can hear bystanders desperately trying to alert police. Authorities now using that video as part of the investigation.
Walk us through what you were seeing in the minutes before the actual shooting happened.
Well, there was a lot of people around the building that were complaining about some guy crawling up the building and then crawling up the roof.
Gentlemen, so we're going to bring him up should we bring him up for a couple of minutes? You get ready. So the world will see a vibrant Republican.
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look, there he is right there. Right there, you see him? He's laying down. You see him?
Yeah, he's laying down. And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And you know, that's a little bit over. If you want to see something,
According to a former agent, Secret Service counter sniper teams should have scoped out and advanced all those areas where there were potential threats beforehand and known what the line of sight to Trump could be.
The fact that somebody was able to get within 200 yards with a rifle and be on an exposed rooftop, be seen by other people there, be seen by where it should have been cameras and drones and many other things in place to watch for that, something broke down. That shooter with that rifle should have never been that close to the former president of the United States at a venue like this.
Thank you for showing that video. Appreciate that. And so we've seen aspects of those videos because those are public domain videos. One spectator was killed, and we express condolences to his family, Corey Comprador. Two others were critically injured, David Dutch, James Copenhaver. And then narrowly escaping with his life was former President Trump. That's why we're here. And the timeline is probably too small for you to read, but I'm going to go over the timeline just briefly and with the experts here in just a second. But first, I want to acknowledge also our condolences to the 13 veterans killed in Afghanistan during that disastrous retreat. I also acknowledge our colleague Bob Good's presence today, his interest in this, appreciate his interest in this. Our former colleague Jason Chaffetz and Mark Morgan, we appreciate all of you being here today. So let's take a look at this from the local perspective. Ben, thank you for being here. Let's talk about the communications. Let's start there. Was there a central communications center in place?
Yes, there were. That was by the Butler Emergency Services Unit.
And typically, what was the Secret Service? Did they have a person on the scene, a decision maker on the scene in case an emergency happened?
I believe that there were a Secret Service agent responsible for the scene. However, they were not, to my knowledge, co-located at the command center itself.
And so I want to make clear. So who was present in the communications command center that might have made decisions for Secret Service?
Secret Service, on my understanding, is that the information that was gathered by the command center, which would have been being operated by the Butler Emergency Services Unit and the commander in that capacity, he was responsible for relaying that information to a point of contact he had. And my understanding was that it was over a cell phone as opposed to in-person communications.
Is that normal to have a cell phone communication, or is there usually a body there that can make a decision?
In most security postures and events that I've been part of for these types of events, there is someone actually physically co-located for that reason. Due to the loss of cell phone service, which we experienced that day, a possible loss of radio communications that day. It's a very robust and fail-proof way to communicate because of the level of importance that's needed.
Let's put it this way, were radios and communication implements offered to Secret Service by the local operators?
They were, yes.
And what was the form of the communication?
The form of communication would have been some type of encrypted law enforcement style radio.
And do you know, did the Secret Service avail themselves of that? Did they obtain those radios?
I believe they were offered, but I do not believe they were taken.
So they did not utilize the preferred mechanisms of communication that was offered to them.
That's correct.
Let's talk timeline for a second. So if we look at this timeline, it indicates to us, I'll go 5:10, at 5:10 p.m., the shooter is identified as a suspicious person near the AGR building. Does that sound right to what you're understanding of the timeline?
Yes, sir.
And so at least some point, somebody had seen him by 5:10 p.m. That's an hour before the shooting. They adjudicated he was suspicious. And in testimony before the committees of Congress, they indicated to us that, when I say they, I'm talking Cheadle, Rowe, and Ray, the directors and interim directors of Secret Service and FBI. They indicated to us that there's a distinction between a suspicious person and a threat. And so you have a suspicious individual, you have a threat, there's an interim category as well. What's that interim category?
In our line of communications from a SWAT point of view and from a tactical point of view, our escalation of people that we encounter starts out as a suspicious person, then goes to a person of interest, and then from that level upgrades to what we refer to as a threat. And each one of those warrant a different response.
So the actual shooting takes place right about 6:11 p.m. So an hour elapses. How soon after the first identification of the shooter, which is at 5:10 p.m., did you? Well, before we get there, let's lay the foundation. What were you doing that day?
I was in a counter sniper role with one of my teammates in the southwest quadrant of the event center. Distance-wise, it was approximately 238 yards southwest of the podium and approximately 348 southwest of the shooter's final firing position.
And so he was not ever in your sector of responsibility?
Nor in my visual, nor sector, nor visual. I never had visual.
How soon after he's identified were you given information that, or did you hear information that there was a suspicious character that you should be alerted to?
Believe those text messages came across, and just to give some background on the text message tactics. So in this type of event, as tactical officers, we try to build redundancy in communications because it's so critical. We start out in a primary role, which would have been our radios that day, communicating on a designated channel amongst all the tactical operators. Because we were in support of the host agency, which would have been the Butler, the Emergency Services Unit, we also were running a secondary channel that was our local Washington Regional SWAT team channel. On top of that, the snipers and counter snipers, or I should just say the counter snipers, there were no snipers involved in our chat, had set up another chat to be able to provide any type of pictures or any type of relevant media or anything like that we'd have been able to crosstalk.
So did you ever see any pictures? Were any pictures ever sent to you?
They were. The pictures came across the chat at approximately 5:38.
So about 30 minutes after the shooter, then at that time, he was a suspicious individual.
That's correct.
And when he gets up on the roof and he's crawling across the roof, is that what threat assessment would normally be made of that guy at that point?
Sure. I think it's important to mention that, from the time the original pictures were taken, the comment of him possibly having a rangefinder or that he was confirmed to have a rangefinder at that point would have automatically escalated him in our protocols from a suspicious person into a person of interest, type of either investigatory detention or a stop and question at that point when the rangefinder became a factor.
Ben, Mr. Shaver, at what point in that hour or before were you notified of the rangefinder, the use of a rangefinder?
Within minutes of the original information being passed. So I would say shortly after 5:38 p.m. or 17:38.
Thank you so much.
My time's expired. You bet.
Mr. Biggs, Mr. Schaefer, thank you so much. At this point, we will turn it over for 10 minutes with the Honorable Eli Crane.
Thank you. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Prince. I know you have a bit of a public profile, but I'm not sure everybody here understands the depth of your experience here. What was the name of the organization that you founded, sir?
Blackwater.
How many employees did you have at Blackwater when you ended up selling the company?
At peak of about 3,500 Americans deployed doing everything from very high-end executive security to aviation and training.
3,500. That's it's pretty large company.
Brigade size.
Yeah. With other protective companies that did executive protection around the world, how did you guys rack and stack? Were you one of the largest companies, one of the smaller companies?
I'd say we were the largest doing that. We never really intended to be in the security business. I started after the SEAL teams and built a training facility. SEAL teams have been using private facilities since the 1970s, and no one had done one on an industrial scale. And started, and then as the demand signal of 2 wars and all the gaps created by trying to take a conventional military into a counterinsurgency created a lot of demand signal. And so we responded by providing a lot of executive security and ended up doing most of the diplomatic security work for almost 10 years.
Yeah. Though there's some similarities between what the Secret Service does and what you had to do overseas, there are definitely some differences.
Sure. In fact, we interacted with the Secret Service whenever the president or some other senior person was coming over. In fact, before we took over security first for Paul Bremer in Iraq, the Secret Service came over to do a study if they wanted to handle it, and they didn't want to touch it at all because they are used to being able to shut down everything and create their own bubble. You can't do that in an active war zone. So that job fell to us, and we grew into that. It was, and that expertise also led us to doing a lot of training for other State Department programs where we'd had at least a dozen countries send their Secret Service equivalents that protected their presidents, and whether that's Lebanon, Colombia, Taiwan, a lot of places with active threats and very active, whether it's Sicarios or Hezbollah, we prepped those units to face that kind of threat. And you know, we did it. We did 100,000 missions. No one under our care was ever killed or injured.
I want you to repeat that, sir. Did you guys ever lose a protectee?
No, we did not.
Thank you. You said something interesting on an episode of Sean Ryan that I saw a couple weeks ago. You said it's in, you know, thank God it was a 20-year-old kid and not a 10-man Hezbollah team. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Sure, because the fact that a 20-year-old kid could get his drone in the air, could get himself into a firing position only 140 yards away. 140 yards is point blank range. My then 12-year-old son could have made that shot. And thank God that 20-year-old aimed at a headshot at President Trump, because if he'd aimed center mass, President Trump would probably be dead, because I don't think he was wearing plates. He wasn't wearing any kind of body armor that would have stopped that rifle round. And a 78-year-old man taking a gunshot wound to the upper chest is not going to go well. A Hezbollah team or ISIS or you name the terrorist organization that actually knows what they're doing would have been successful that day. And the Secret Service was nearly defeated by a 20-year-old, and we all, including Donald Trump, literally dodged a bullet that day.
So I want to double down on that real quick. In your opinion, in your professional opinion, is the Secret Service in its current form and leadership able to stop a threat like that?
President Trump was definitely deprived of resources that day for whatever their political reason. They had 1/3 the amount of agents covering him as were covering Jill Biden in the same region at an indoor event. She had 12 post holders covering her. Again, no statutory or constitutional authority for the First Lady. Donald J. Trump was awarded, had 4 Secret Service agents assigned. And I think even when you look at the debacle of a failure of the advance team to actually secure the perimeter and to deny the obvious sniper hotel locations where a bad guy is going to set up from, to the complete lack of coordination and communication, not communicating with the local law enforcement, not taking the radios of local law, come on, to even when shots were fired, the clumsy, unprofessional way of getting the protectee off the X. There was catastrophic failure across the entire enterprise.
Thank you. Mr. Bongino, I want to turn to you real quick. As somebody with a lot of experience in the Secret Service, is it correct, sir, that you at this point have members of the Secret Service whistleblowing and calling you right now to talk to you about the culture of the Secret Service?
There were so many. It's getting to the point now where I thank them and say, but I've already heard that from 10 other guys. And I bring that up because none of these problems are new. Anybody telling you that is lying directly to your face, and you better hope they're not under oath. Anyone is suggesting in a congressional hearing or elsewhere that these problems are new, the personnel problems, the logistics problems, the manpower problems, the technology problems. I just told you a sad running joke in the service when I was there. I'm gone since 2011. Last time I checked, it's 2024. It was yesterday's technology tomorrow. And other things here that are inexcusable that have been brought up before, like Ben and Eric just brought up. The communication failures are basic. This isn't like the Secret Service $1 million radio system that uses NSA level encryption magically broke down that day. They literally handed them a radio they didn't take. This is why when Congressman Mills says, borderline criminal negligence, you should take that seriously. What could possibly be your excuse to say, you know what, I don't really need to communicate with the law enforcement guys out there on the scene. We asked to, they had no obligation to be there. It's a Secret Service's job to protect the president. Out of a courtesy, they showed up. And you don't even have the respect of these local law enforcement people, respect for them to take the radio? I mean, where was the CP, the command post? The way this works, so everybody understands, or it's supposed to and didn't that day, for reasons still unexplained outside of, again, obscene negligence, any trip for a high-level protectee, you're supposed to have a command post that runs the whole trip at the airport or whatever. They'll communicate with everyone. But those individual sites, like in Butler County, have security rooms themselves, which are kind of mini CPs at each site. Where was it? According to what Ben said before, and from what I've heard, it was either not there or the locals were running it, offered communications, and the Secret Service, whose job it was that day to protect President Trump, said, we're going to pass on the comms. Really, you described it as catastrophic. He's 100% correct. Eric knows exactly what he's talking about. Just apocalyptic failure.
Mr. Bongino, in your opinion, is the Secret Service in a better spot today with Director Rowe in charge?
No, it's worse. And sadly, I'm glad this is all being recorded, because when something else happens, and I hope it doesn't, I pray to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that I'm wrong, that you play this and go, look, that guy was crazy. You think this is the last incident, you're out of your mind. We have seen these incidents over and over. We saw the Georgia grenade incident with President Bush. They overtook the magnetometers. The Secret Service leadership in charge now with the exact same people. Exact same. Can you imagine a C-suite at a company that makes widgets? We find out that there's a design defect. The widget explodes and kills 10 people, and the CTO gets a promotion to CEO. You understand that's what happened here, correct? These are the same people. Kim Cheadle, the director, wasn't even fired. She was allowed to resign. She'll go get some cushy job somewhere, and her deputy, who is one of the guys behind these stupid waste of time things like agents wearing red ties on the detail, because this actually happened, by the way. These people will tell you this on the road if you get the right people. He was concerned about the tie color of the agents on the detail because it seemed to imply he supported President Trump. Congressman Biggs wearing a red tie. You're wearing a semi-red tie. There's nothing to do with anything. This is the kind of stuff the Secret Service was actually wasting their time with while withholding CSU counter surveillance assets and counter sniper assets from probably the most threatened man on earth. If you can explain it, good luck, because that's not the agency I worked for.
My last question is for Ben Schaefer. In your opinion, Mr. Schaefer, why were counter snipers in AGR that had access to the entire building, from what we've been told, not able to see crooks crawling up the roof when we've seen several videos from the ground level taken by bystanders and individuals not even tasked to be doing security were able to photograph crooks wearing no camouflage, crawling on a white roof? Why were the snipers, the local snipers, not able to see crooks and dispatch of him?
I can only pass this knowledge through secondhand communications. I was not privy to that location or to survey that ahead of time. Although I have spoken to those individuals that were placed in that room that day, based on the depth of the room, their placements, and the limited field of view that those windows provided. They were pretty narrow, as most standard residential windows are held. The angle was too hard for them to see that far to their east, which if they would have been facing south.
Thank you so much. Appreciate my colleague Eli. With that, I'll turn over 10 minutes to the Honorable Matt Gaetz.
Mr. Prince, you're one of the people I trust most about global affairs. You're constantly assessing the threat environment and intelligence. And I guess my question to you is, because this has been laid bare and these weaknesses have been exposed, are you concerned that we're likely to face not another Crooks, but perhaps a threat like you described, a team from a foreign adversary, a terrorist organization, trying to expose and exploit the weaknesses that now we've seen?
I am very concerned. The inability of the Secret Service or the U.S. government writ large to adjust, to learn a painful lesson from that failure and actually make concrete changes. Because again, the fact that a 20-year-old nearly killed Donald Trump, and the failure to adapt to even yesterday's technology, let alone tomorrow's. And when you see the step change of the ability to deliver precision fires at extended ranges, the lessons being learned on the battlefield of Ukraine, the ability for small units to deliver devastating precision fire onto any target, whether it's the White House, whether it's a motorcade, whether it's a president outside or even inside somewhere, is significant. And I don't think they have any idea what's coming at them.
And what Mr. Bongino seems to have told us is they haven't learned the lesson. He's told us decade after decade that we should not expect the lesson to be learned by osmosis. Mr. Bongino, I will have to draw on your experience in protecting folks. I have none, but I do have some experience in observing what a government agency does when they're not telling the truth and they're trying to hide something. And the pattern recognition always goes to some form of scapegoating. We saw it at DOD when people refused the vax, they were scapegoated and driven out. We saw it at FBI when whistleblowers talked about spying at school board meetings and at Catholic churches, they were driven out. And now I take note of the fact that certain people at the Pittsburgh field office have been put on leave. And I've also seen the story change where initially the Secret Service was blaming folks in local government, and then there was admission that there weren't appropriate responses to requests for additional manpower. So what I'd really like to do with you is bring us into that process, because Senator Hawley now has a whistleblower saying there was a manpower request that was coming out of Pittsburgh, and headquarters Secret Service was putting downward pressure on the local agents to try to reduce the intensity of that manpower request. So give Congress a little sense. How does that get developed? And then what should we think about the fact that someone is saying that headquarters was trying to get people to not make requests of enhanced protection?
Well, I can give you an example from personal experience. I saw Senator Hawley's tweet. The Secret Service is going to rely on this and what they're trying to do now, and you're accurate in your analysis about how this cover-up is starting to work. What they're going to say is, well, there was no real formal request made. Here's an example, and then I'll tie something to something that happened to me. Imagine you're working for a company, a public company. It's actual accountability, stock will tank or whatever. You can't make products that'll kill people. You'll go out of business. If you do, there's a penalty. But imagine you're told by your safety guy, you're the CEO, and your chief safety officer says, 50 to 60 times. Hey, again, this widget has a defect. And if we put this out, it's going to kill someone. And it's clear after the 50th time that the CEO doesn't care. So when the 51st time you tell the product blows up, the CEO's going to say, well, he didn't tell me yesterday. Well, he didn't tell you because he told you 50 times before and you ignored him. So what they're doing now is Ron Rowe, the acting director, who is the deputy director, the number 2, who is unbelievably, again, got a promotion out of this. A guy was murdered and someone got promoted, which is obscene and disgusting. He is part and parcel to this whole day-to-day ADPO, Assistant Director, Protective Operations, Deputy Director, Director chain that makes management decisions. When they tell you early on, we are not doing this for President Trump, Congressman. We're not doing counter sniper teams. We're not doing CSU. And then they say, well, on that day, we didn't deny assets. You didn't have to. You've been denying them for 4 years. I was told by a direct source, this is the quote, that at Mar-a-Lago, they were begging the DTD, the Donald Trump detail, begging for enhanced security. We can't secure this place like this. And one of the quotes from one of those 3 people I just told you about was, we don't secure nightclubs. Really? What if a nightclub owner runs for president? You don't secure you secure whatever the hell they tell you to secure. That's not your job. That is what happened here. And that's what they're going to rely on. And that's where you guys, I think, have had the guts to take this on. Do not let them fall back on euphemisms and word games where they go, well, that specific day we didn't say no to any assets. Have you in the past? How often? Matter of fact, how many counter surveillance teams have you actually dedicated? What percentage of Trump sites? How many CS teams? There's a story out there that was the first time counter sniper Secret Service assets were ever used at a Donald Trump site. So you're telling me your most threatened protectee had no professional Secret Service overwatch? As Ben showed, these guys are more than skilled and competent. They don't need the Secret Service to tell them how to do their job.
I think that gets to this intent question that Congressman Mills framed up perfectly at the beginning of our discussion. Congressman Mills says the key question here is whether this was your run-of-the-mill government incompetence or whether you see features of such just disregard for the duty at hand that you believe there's some malice. And in his opening statement, Mr. Prince says when the incompetence reaches a certain point, you can impute the malice to that. And what I think you have unique experience in is, well, like this culture of denying requests, like to Trump, or a circumstance where not even the Donald Trump detail, but the folks in the Pittsburgh field office who are not normally on the Trump detail were saying, hey, just based on this, we might need more. And they were discouraged from even making those requests, so they couldn't be denied. I think you can give us a lot of insight into the type of questions we need to be asking and of who to understand that culture, because like you think of the Secret Service, they're off with a number of protectees, yes, right? Of all kind of different profiles and different, I guess, priority, for lack of a better term. And so like, what should we think about imputing malice at a point in which Donald Trump, one of the most threatened people on the planet Earth, is having to endure these denials and this culture of limited protection while you're seeing other details, beefed up substantially?
I think, and I don't think I put this out yet, but I'll put it out there now. When I was there, it was definitely not a political enterprise. It just wasn't. I never once, working for President Clinton, Bush, and Obama, had anyone even remotely implicate a political motive for any decision whatsoever. However, from the commentary directed at some of the agents in charge of the Donald Trump detail, which I have heard about, clearly, it appears that for the first time in American history, we have a Secret Service that is making decisions that may not be all political, but may have a political tinge to them. So what you're saying, I would love to say, Congressman, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But I tell you with a pure heart, and I'm being absolutely candid, I have no skin in this game. I don't work there anymore. I am not their PR guy. I run my own business. I absolutely believe Donald Trump and an enhanced security posture he should have had would have made him look more presidential, would have facilitated the logistical operation of him traveling. I think they were concerned about optics and making him look like a big shot or whatever, word you want to throw out there. And they were making some of these decisions based purely on grade school level politics.
I don't want to believe that, but I didn't want to believe it with the FBI either. I didn't want to believe it with the NIH either. I mean, a lot of these agencies that have been, I think, subject to political capture, we want to think of them as above that. And we all spend time around Secret Service. We're inspired by their patriotism and the willingness you have to literally take a bullet for someone if necessary. But just like in the military, just like at the FBI, I worry about the political capture happening at headquarters, and then that culture informing decisions in a way that's very damaging to the country. So what Mr. Bongino just said ought to be the most important work of the United States Congress, to figure out if these decisions were run-of-the-mill incompetence that you've got to deal with the better tech and the better processes and the better HR and get rid of the DEI. But if it's something even darker and more devious than that, that must be rooted out, because what we've seen at these other agencies of government is it does not cure itself. It has to be excised, and that investigation is the most important work we can do. I thank you guys for leading this effort, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. With that, I just want to go first to you, Mr. Prince. You said you roughly have about 3,500 at the peak of Blackwater, correct?
That's right.
Secret Service currently has approximately 7,000 approximately. What was your highest annual revenue, if you don't mind me asking, give or take, for that many operations?
Ooh, for that, the protective mission was about 2,500 to 2,800, and that revenue would have been around $600 million.
So $600 million for that.
Again, that's deploying in a war zone where 41 of our men, my men, were killed.
So
in
safe to
action.
say, if you had $3.3 billion allocated to you, you could have done some even more miraculous things with resource and assets, correct?
I'll give a simple comparison. Around 2005, George W. Bush wanted to grow the size of the Border Patrol. I remember being called to a congressional hearing then because they compared what it would cost us to train a new CBP agent versus what the federal government was going to take. And our figure came in at 1/3. And their figure was actually higher than sending someone to Harvard for 4 years, and that's to train a guy for 4 months. That's it. So it's the federal government blows money. Like I said in my testimony.
And my point is that the failed metric of government, whereby the more we spend, the better outcome we receive, is a flawed and failed measure, which is why we're at $36 trillion in deficit. And the reason I use that $3 billion, as you know, Mr. Prince, is because that's the actual amount that appropriators have allocated to the Secret Service, which means that, to Dan Bongino's comment, they shouldn't be utilizing past equipment to serve tomorrow. They should have more than enough assets and resources in place with a $3 billion budget. Would you not agree?
Certainly.
And I want to go to you, Mr. Bongino. I want to point out some things because culture failure, as my colleague has pointed out and others, I want to mention a couple of things. August 14th, 2024 is reported failure that a Secret Service agent abandoned her post without permission to breastfeed child before Donald Trump was scheduled to arrive in North Carolina. August 12th, 2024, it was reported that a Secret Service special agent who was an official site agent for the July 13 Butler PA rally is under investigation for posting videos and photos for protective assignments to social media. July 27, 2024, a Secret Service agent covered the security camera of a local salon in Pittsburgh, Massachusetts before an event featuring Kamala Harris where the salon was closed, but opened it up without approval and utilizing restrooms for an hour and a half while the building security alarm was going off. July 2nd, 2023, it was reported that a former Secret Service Director Cheadle and senior agency leader sought to destroy the cocaine found in the White House in July of 2024. The evidence was not destroyed due to pushback in individuals in the Secret Service Forensic Service divisions. May 2024, a man enters the U.S. Secret Service Miami field office through a propped open door and was not removed from the building until the following morning. April 24, 2024, a special agent assigned to Harris's detail had a mental breakdown where the agent is reported to have physically attacked the commanding agent in charge at the base after verbal disputes with other agents. Sometimes during 2023 and 2024, at least 2 people breached President Obama's Hawaii residence, though the president wasn't there at the residence. His 2 daughters were on premise at the time. April 2023, a drunken intruder entered the home of National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in the middle of the night. The man was able to gain access to Sullivan's home despite 24/7 Secret Service protective services in Sullivan due to the sensitive nature of his position. Now, I want to go back to a comment that you made, Mr. Bongino. where he said none of these problems are new. I think just the list of those that I've just mentioned shows that this is not a new problem, but has existed for quite a while. And with a $3 billion annual budget, I would think that we would start evaluating those mistakes to make those corrective actions. Would you agree with the things that I've listed, with the budget that is allocated, that there should be a much better provision of security for protectees than what you're seeing today?
Oh, there's zero dispute about this. You know, Mr. Prince's company had accountability. People fire him and find a new company if he lost the protectee. You can't fire the Secret Service. 18 USC 3056, they're obligated to protect him. The Secret Service has a culture problem, Congressman. I was an instructor in our training academy in Beltsville, Maryland for 3 years. I ran operations over there, taught investigations over there, spent a little time in the control tactics unit. I was there for 3 years. Unfortunately, I can't count on one hand. I would need probably two and toes as well to count how many agents who could not meet even basic protective functioning skills and criminal investigative skills, but who met other criteria completely irrelevant to job performance, who were pushed through and told with a wink and a nod, this woman or man needs to graduate. Well, why? They're clearly incompetent. Every instructor who's encountered this person has said this person's incompetent, to the point where in judgment drills, they're killing the protectee in the judgment drills. That's kind of not what we do. You're not supposed to shoot the protectee yourself in a simunition drill. And you would say things, you would hear things, excuse me, from special agents in charge. And I encourage you all to look into this, how the training center works and how they graduate students, where they would say, well, that person files a lot of complaints, like EEO complaints. Okay, well, are they real? That sounds serious. Sounds like a serious thing to me. I take that stuff seriously. And they would say, well, they file them enough that it's become a nuisance and they're not really legitimate. But because this person files a lot of complaints, we need to graduate them. Some of those people now, matter of fact, not just a few, but many are out on protective assignments now. And again, this
So what
is
you're
not
saying is that DEI plays a major role, not meritocracy, with regards to the current culture that has been fostered.
No, not a. No, the major role. The Secret Service right now is dominated by DEI. It's not a role. It's the role. You ask agents on the president.
I think that everyone's heard me say before, DEI equals DIE. You know, DEI stands for didn't earn it. And
Well,
we
it
need to
did
be
for
very
Corey
cautious in how
Comparator.
we
So
do this.
ask his family.
Correct. I just want to move on briefly with the time. Mr. Schaefer, I just need you to kind of confirm the no's. And when I say confirm the no's, you'll understand. Didn't take the communication platform that was given by local forces, correct?
That's correct.
Didn't take the surveillance drone offered by local forces, is that correct?
That is correct.
Didn't show up for the morning briefing to ensure that last minute planning could be accounted for.
That is correct.
Didn't take any necessary measures to talk to the Kubota dealer who was 400 yards away to the 12 o'clock direct line of sight to even see whether or not they could gain access to that rooftop or talk to the owner.
That is correct.
Did not access the water tower, which has the highest vantage point, and provide oversight that would have also looked at the AGR building.
That is correct.
You know, I'm looking at all this and I'm noting a lot of no's of things that didn't happen. And unfortunately, because we've allowed this to go on for weeks and weeks, we're now going to be faced with the fact that they're going to be memorializing all these documents to reflect July 9, July 10, July 11, dotting I's, crossing T's that wasn't actually going forward. Now, I want to ask you something, Mr. Prince, because you know this all too well about counterterrorism operations. We know for a fact that we have an open border with roughly 10 million people that's come across. We know that cartels are cheering on President Joe Biden as the employee of the month every single month. When you think about 2018, where you had $500 million in revenue from cartel to now $13+ billion in revenue. If you knew a president was coming in that would put things like Romania and Mexico back in place, secure our borders and cut your revenue, you have the training, you have the assets, you have the revenue. Would you deem that person as a threat and want to take that individual out?
It's a very simple answer, because you can see what they did in the last Mexican election that just happened a few months ago. They killed 27 conservative candidates, assassinated while campaigning.
And noting that you had the successful counterterrorism operation that eliminated the shadow master, Qasem Soleimani of Quds Force, as well as for Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes, who led the Iranian proxy militias of Iraq, would you deem that as them declaring a fatwa to increase your threat profile as an individual protectee?
Certainly the Iranians would see it as a risk worth taking.
And you also note that a question that needs to be asked of the FBI is that on July 12th, a 46-year-old Pakistani male named Dabrand was actually captured, who had also plotted assassination against President Donald J. Trump and 35 elected officials. The question is how did you think an individual who's on a terrorist watch list landed in Houston, Texas, was questioned by the FBI, and I would love to hear his answers because they must have been spectacular, and then released, noting that this individual flew from Pakistan to Iran for 4 days prior to this? Would you note that is very questionable?
Again, you can put him in the long list of other people that don't belong here, that our federal government is failing to do their job.
Thank you. With that, I have run out of my time. I will now hand it over to the Honorable Chip Roy for 10 minutes.
I thank my friend from Florida, Mr. Mills. Thank my colleagues here. I thank you, gentlemen, for testifying here today. And I'd ask my staff they'd put the map up here on the board. And if you would please, the technology folks, would you please play the shooter on roof behind President Trump angle video? And as we get this queued up and we start to play it, I'm gonna ask you some questions. I'm gonna start with you, Mr. Bongino. Trying through the question that I'm wrestling with, a lot of Americans are wrestling with, which is whether or not the failures here that we're all observing. Everybody agrees there was failure, almost catastrophic failure, and certainly catastrophic for Mr. Comparator and his family. But was there more? Was there willful blindness here? So if you could cue up the video, that'd be great. They've got that queued up. If they don't, then I'm just gonna go ahead and proceed.
Great gentlemen. So we're going to bring him up for. Can we bring him up for a couple of minutes? You get ready, McCormick. You get ready. I'll get you up here. The world will see a vibrant Republican.
See beyond the president, you can see the shooter moving across the room. Now, I look at this as someone who is a prosecutor, who worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office, who worked in the Attorney General's office, not as someone who was a sniper like Mr. Mills or Mr. Crane, working the Secret Service. But to be very clear, the perimeter, the building he shot from is outside of the perimeter. And the video we see, we can see him clearly just a mere 130 yards away. So here's the setup that I want to ask. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Bongino. Do you believe that you can just chalk up to mere incompetence that the Secret Service did not attend the 9 o'clock meeting for scheduling purposes? They literally just didn't attend. Can you chalk up, and just, I'm going to go down the list and just jump in. Can you chalk up to mere incompetence the conversations about the communications that we talked about before, where you didn't have a body present and they were using the cell phones and they did not retrieve the radios, as Mr. Higgins has reported? Can you chalk it up to mere incompetence that they identified crooks about an hour ahead of time, and that the President Trump, was never removed from the stage? They didn't delay, they didn't hold him back, they didn't remove him from the potential danger. That the perimeter did not include the buildings around over here, and to the extent, should there have been a perimeter that was farther out, and to the extent that the perimeter wasn't farther out, that they at least make sure the building wasn't covered. Is that just incompetence? Is it just incompetence that there was no drone being flown and the drone was turned down by the Secret Service? Was it just incompetence that the shooter had a drone, as the FBI director testified in front of the House Judiciary Committee, that he literally had flying within a couple hundred feet of the stage the same day, mere hours before the shooting? Is it just incompetence, what we're hearing now about the whistleblower saying that there were no canines? Was it just incompetence that there wasn't sufficient policing along the security border? Was it just incompetence that there was allegedly an abandoning of the post due to heat? That there was supposed to be someone on top of the roof and that they didn't get on the roof because it was too hot? Is it just incompetence that there was additional security requests turned down, according to the memos that we saw out of Senator Josh Hawley, and encouraging agents not to request to additional security requests? And was it just incompetence what we saw with respect to the police body footage, which I'll play here in just a second, if we could cue up the police body footage video, where you've got the local police talking about what they said to the Secret Service? If y'all could play that video real quick, and then I want you to respond.
Well, body's a good, that's a good word. I told them they need to post the guy over here. I told them that the Secret Service. I told them that Tuesday. I told them to post guys over here. I have no contact with the inside. What? I thought you guys were. No, we're inside. Alpha 1, Bravo 1.
Okay, that's good. Thank you all. Mr. Bongino.
I told him to post.
Can you
guys over here.
respond to that? To my question about can you respond to that? Can you respond to that question? Because that's what the American people want to know.
You know, Congressman, if you had just ended with your first statement and said, well, we may have screwed up the perimeter, you could maybe attribute it to ignorance. Layered incompetence always means intent, correct? So I'll give you an example. You're in a mall parking lot, it's 97 degrees, and you leave a kid in there and you close the door. Did they intend to kill the kid? Probably not. But how stupid do you have to be to do that? So in Secret Service training, you're basically taught a ring-based system, but don't think of it as rings. Think of it as a three-dimensional ring, like a bubble with rings. So you got this circle, but it's three-dimensional above and below. In that outer ring, again, this is Secret Service 101, Charlie Brown encyclopedia stuff. This isn't like advanced level PDT, protective detail training. In that outer ring, you have police officers. That outer ring is out to about 1,000 yards, which is about what a really technically proficient sniper can hit. Why was the perimeter set to, again, absolute total incompetence, but then factor in the other things, and I just want to add a few more. How is it that a counter surveillance unit whose actual job is to detect, to counter surveillance, that's what they do. They're the best at what they do. We asked the question during the conversation we had earlier. How is it that they missed this guy roaming around when the police officers clearly using their good law enforcement instincts said we've got a problem? The answer is because they weren't there. Is that incompetence or is that shutting the door in 97 degrees with your kid there going, I just didn't know? How did you not have a roof line 130 yards away secured when you're taught day one in Secret Service training that the effective range of a really quality sniper is out to 1,000 yards? How did you not have a drone? That not only did you not have a drone, again, this is where we get to the shutting the door in 97 degrees and pretending you didn't know. It was offered. They offered you a drone. It's unforgivable. And just think of the rings quickly, and I'll wrap this up. So in the outer ring, you have police officers, you have counter surveillance, and you have a protective intelligence team. Protective intelligence team is trained to go and find threats. They miss them. There's no counter surveillance team. The cops catch it, but because the comms break down, they miss it. In that middle perimeter, you have what they call post standers. Post standers they're not DTD agents. They're field office agents. They're not Donald Trump detail agents. Those guys were not even Secret Service. They were HSI, most of them, who are great guys and were fantastic. But that's not what they do. If you grab me as a former Secret Service guy and said, hey, Dan, can you go do a Homeland Security investigation on this? No, that's not what I learned. We are training Secret Service agents to do protection so we don't have to use other entities that don't do protection. So that's the middle perimeter. So that breaks down. The inner perimeter, as you just saw, and I'm glad you played that video, envision that as what we would call the shift, the body guys, right? He's got a shift around them and supervisors. Everyone missed that guy crawling across the roof when he defeated the external, the middle, and the internal perimeter. You shut the door in 97 degrees. I'm sorry. Layered intent, layered incompetence like that is absolutely intent.
I've got another question on that, but I just want to ask you, Mr. Prince, real quick. Do you have a relatively short comment on that? Can you dismiss all of this as sheer incompetence?
The question I want to have answered is if other counter sniper agents, officers, saw any person laying in a prone position with a rifle pointed at the President of the United States, do they have authorization to take a shot immediately, or do they have to get permission? Because if the Secret Service wasn't there and they were laying at a stakeout for a bank robbery, would they have to get permission if they saw means and intent to murder someone? I don't understand why any of the other officers didn't engage sooner.
Mr. Schaefer, do you have any comment on that in terms of the engagement and the rules of engagement that were in place?
Yeah, absolutely. I can clarify that a little bit. So as a law enforcement sniper, we have a lot of responsibilities and inherited flexibility. One of those flexible procedures or statuses that we incur is known as compromised authority. Compromised authority in the law enforcement sense basically lays out the requirements for a deadly force response. And in that point in time, based on all the prerequisites that were identified and all the checks in the boxes that were made, Mr. Crook sort of met that level or that threshold.
I'll let some of the experts on that subject follow up on that. I think there's probably some more follow up there. I just want to ask one last question, my last minute time, Mr. Bongino. We talked about this before. I have seen credible information, the extent to which the shooter had significant explosives that were sophisticated beyond that you would expect some 20-year-old just to put together, and that he had sophisticated detonation devices on his person, or a sophisticated detonation device. And importantly, that his digital footprint is completely MIA, that his digital footprint is missing. And that how can a 20-year-old in today's time have no digital footprint? So do you have any thoughts on that? Any comments on that? And that'll be my last question.
Well, 4 years of doing protective intelligence investigations with the Secret Service, interviewed probably hundreds of people who have credibly threatened our protectees. I've never seen anything like it. If you would have told me it was a 60-year-old guy who had lived most of his life without a computer and for the last 10 years have been planning this, hard to believe, but digestible. You're telling me a 20-year-old kid who's grown up in the digital era figured this out when he was, 13, to never get an online presence? We've seen nothing. Nothing. We're now 6 weeks in. There's not a Facebook photo. You know, it's incredible. We know every single thing about these shooting incidents when there's a political narrative to be had by the media and the other side. We do. You know who their high school girlfriend was. Sadly, you know everything about these people. We know nothing about this guy. And sophisticated explosives, we have this massive law enforcement bureaucracy. No one's got him with an online search history at a library saying, how do I build this? He's 20 years old. It just defies logic. I can tell you, again, 4 years doing these exact investigations, never, ever seen or heard anything like this in my life.
Thank you so much. We're now going to go into our second round of questioning. And again, I appreciate the panel and all that you guys have been providing in regards to expertise and on-ground truth realities. We're going to continue to move on, going back to the Honorable Andy Biggs. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to just try to hit some quick questions. When Mr. Schaefer, you were talking to us earlier about moving to texting. The counter snipers were texting. What does that do with your ability to stay on glass?
Was a secondary or possibly even a third method of communication as it was utilized that day. The sniper teams in the law enforcement concept sometimes are not a team. Sometimes we're deployed into situations where we're a single operator. So we're not only responsible for the surveillance aspect of the service we provide, but also having that deadly threat ability on board. So that can be very distracting in that point in that day. That third level of communication would have pulled us away from our primary responsibilities to provide that deadly cover if needed.
Thank you. And Mr. Prince, you mentioned security bubbles. And I want you to elaborate on that because we've talked a little bit about the perimeter. And the perimeter seems oddly narrow in this particular instance. Can you talk about security bubbles and the perimeters here?
As Dan was talking, right, the normal of that bubble is out to 1,000 yards based on how far a capable sniper can take a shot. The fact is, clearly this bubble was less than 100 yards because they disregarded the industrial facility, the water tower, et cetera, and it speaks to the lack of seriousness of Secret Service leadership in how they were conducting these missions. I don't think they regarded Trump as a worthy protectee. They were doing the absolute minimum. And I say my greater concern is as you look at all the litany of failure is long and deep. And if it tips towards malice, that opens up an entirely different can of worms. Because it's hard to be part of a republic with people that actually want to kill you.
Right.
Political disagreement, fine. Sell it at the ballot box. But if people don't want to sell it at the ballot box, they get sold by a cartridge box. And that's a very, very dangerous road to go down.
Right. And well, we could go on that. I know some of my colleagues might want to do that as well. But I want to get to one last point, and that before I run out of time, and that is another failure. I think everybody here is probably, everybody up on this group anyway, has been with a president or a protectee, and there's been some kind of security hold. I mean, we've just stopped and you say you're going to hold. Why was there no security hold put on Trump at any time if you had some kind of individual, I mean, that Mr. Schaefer has described actually did arise to a threat level? Why was there no security hold put on President Trump? Why was he allowed to go on the stage? Why wasn't he taken down? Why didn't we see a pause?
For me.
Yeah, Dan.
What makes your question even more impactful is every Secret Service site for a high threat level protectee has what they call a holding room, which you would guess is for holding the protectee. I see Congressman Gacy because it's actually called the holding room. The holding room is for things just like this. The holding room is, let's say a congressman shows up and is a little late. There's an accident. They'll hold him in the holding room saying, enjoy, you all have been in it. None of this is new. You've been in the holding room. There's a Secret Service agent at the door. You guys have congressional hardpins. A staffer escorts you in. Every one of you has seen this or will in the Trump administration. This is not a mystery to anyone. Why was he put on what Eric had called accurately so the X? We use the exact same terminology as the military. The X is where that protectee or that limo with the protectee in it is. Why was he put on the X? You have an open threat. Ben is described and your timeline lays out was there for an hour. I'm not going to play any word games. Were they a threat or suspicious? Well, if you're a threat, it's because you're doing something suspicious. And if you're suspicious, it's because you could be a threat. These are silly, stupid word games. You know when it's not a threat? When your CSU or PI team goes and grabs the guy and determines he's not a threat. Until then, your question's accurate. You put him in the holding room, which is the point of the holding room.
So I just want to follow that up. And you made the point earlier about counter surveillance. There were no counter surveillance teams there. But there's a public domain videos of him, Mr. Crooks, wandering around. Was there anything in his behavior wandering around that if you would have had a counter surveillance team there, it would have triggered an interaction with this guy earlier?
I'm going to answer yes, but respectfully, and I know you understand, the CSU and PI teams are trained in very specific behavioral indicators that would give off, and speaking about them openly would probably give operational knowledge to bad guys. I know you understand that, but the short answer is not only one, but many behavioral indicators he was giving off that if we could talk in a secure setting, you'd be like, how did they miss this? The CSU team would not have missed it if they were there, which they weren't.
Thank you so much, Mr. Biggs. We will now go to the Honorable Eli Crane for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Bongino, do you have any confidence that Secret Service has learned their lesson?
No, because I've been involved in a number of, we have 10 years in the Secret Service. I was in the training center when the Georgia grenade nearly exploded. And, you know, the only reason it didn't kill President Bush is because the guy wrapped it in a towel. That's it. It's the only reason he survived, because we got lucky. And the changes made from that lasted about a month. They added more magnetometers. And then basically the same problems resurface again. So no.
I want to read a text to you and see what your thoughts are on this. Do you know who Joe Kent is? Mr. Bongino? Joe Kent, he's running for Congress right now, Special Forces guy.
Oh, yes.
Up in Washington.
Yeah.
This is a text he sent me on, I believe, Monday, August 19th. He said, "Hey, brother, I know you are doing an independent J13 investigation. I want to share this anecdote with you from my experience with Speaker Mike Johnson's U.S. Secret Service detail this weekend. Bottom line up front, Speaker's detail was incredibly lax, failed to seal off all entrances to a very small venue. Johnson wasn't secured and very easy to access. Long version. We had a local steakhouse host my fundraiser with the Speaker. Location was only available after people RSVP'd. But the entrances to the steakhouse had Kent for Congress signs on the two entrances. One entrance was inside the hotel, one out on the street in a busy pedestrian area. I arrived about 45 minutes early to check out the venue and to make sure my team had stuff ready. I also wanted to see if the U.S. Secret Service had a checkpoint set up. I carry everywhere. I planned on leaving my pistol in a hotel room my team had there. I entered the hotel, followed the Kent signs into the steakhouse, and immediately walked up to the unsecured holding room the speaker was in. He was on a call, so he did not notice me. Neither did any of his detail. His detail was inside the restaurant just BSing. No control over the two entrances at all. Once the event started, they put on a good show and looked the part. I can't interpret their intent, but they failed a basic, simple task: secure the two entry points, a shocking level of incompetence. The event was in Vancouver in the shadow of Portland, Oregon. Mr. Bongino, is Speaker Johnson, what's his job?
Well, that'd be Capitol Hill Police, but it speaks to a larger issue with these security failures. What was mentioned about 3/4 of the way through that text, where everything becomes about optics. I'll give you just a quick example. You know, think about this. Why are Secret Service agents out there wearing suits? You don't see that with a lot of Israeli Shin Bet and others, because the threat over there is existential every day. I mean, these are little things. You're worried about optics and what people look like, you know, red ties on agents and guys who've got their shoes shined, when you're not worried about door kickers who are going to keep you alive. The good show part is a problem, and it's ubiquitous, whether it's DSS, whether it's Capitol, whether it's Secret Service. We have to start focusing on job tasks and not, you know, operational optics or who's got the freshly pressed suit on. These guys have to be out there ready to go into action and defeat that 15, 20-man Hezbollah team or group of Sicarios Eric's talking about before. This was a 20-year-old kid who broke them down. Can you imagine if they had detonated, taken out that fence line and rushed a 10, 15-man team in there with rifles and heavy weapons?
I think all of us on. Can anyone hear me okay? Check, check. So we're going to start off this forum and hearing. I want to thank our guests for being here today and our subject matter experts. I also want to thank Representative Bob Good for being in attendance. The purpose of this hearing is to ensure that we have the ability to ask the questions that are necessary to get transparency on the attempted assassination of President Donald J. Trump in Butler, PA on July 13th. In this hearing, we will identify a lot of the actual failures, but I will be first to tell you that given the fact of the untimeliness and which point this has been conducted, you will see at this stage where I think that criminal gross negligence and purposeful intent will be indistinguishable. There was a lot of things that we can point to as critical failures. As the United States Congressman for Florida's 7th District, I had conducted at least 1,000 of these advances in my lifetime with regards to the State Department and others. And I can tell you, having worked on a counter sniper team, having worked on an advanced team, that there are critical failures that need to be identified so that the American people can understand the transparency of it, but also to raise the questions and awarenesses of why. That is the intent of this entire hearing, is to get to the why, get to those who are responsible, bearing in mind, responsibility and accountability are two very different things. This is not an I'm sorry, I'll resign, I'm finished. This is a get accountability to pursue either purposeful intent or criminal gross negligence. The questions that we have to ask is, why was a venue such as the one selected not having the adequate security? Why was the higher vantage points not covered? Why was there not a either comparable or compatible communication system or a joint operations center established? Where was the security plan, the comms plan, the data range cards? Where was the actual overwatch? Where was the ground teams as far as their rates of instruction? And what was the tactical techniques and procedures that were to be utilized that would identify and mitigate all the existing threats? I think that this is just the start as we continue to unpeel the layers and layers of why was there not an early morning briefing with all to ensure communications and last minute security plans? Why was the surveillance drone not utilized even though it was offered? And who ultimately is responsible and will be held accountable for one of the truly most life-changing incidents for a lot of us, where we almost lost the former president of the United States? I think that it's easy to see why an independent investigation is needed. I think that we understand that if this was to have been conducted correctly, then July 14th, we would have had immediate subpoena to get the security plans, comms plans, the motorcade operational plan, the actual counter snipers range fan data cards, and started questioning the individuals independently to do corroborations of fact fiction boards to see what's going on. But we hope that with the continual failures within the federal government and the lack of transparency that's been provided to date, that this will help to be a benchmark of where we can move going forward to try and rebuild the confidence in your elected officials. That we will not hide behind low-level classifications, and that we will guarantee the transparency and accountability that the American people deserve. This panel that we have put together is also to acknowledge those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. Today is August 26th, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our 13 fallen heroes in Afghanistan of August 26, 2021, and the sacrifice that's been made on behalf of a grateful nation. It's time for us to reflect on what the cost is of these freedoms, and I also want to acknowledge the service and the murder of Corey Compatore, and let his family know that we are here, we are listening, and that we will get accountability. I want to thank our members that are here as well. And I want to just end with this. While this is the first hearing of its kind to come together, it won't be the last. And that this is a message to all of Congress, that if we are not selecting people based on meritocracy, that independent
rooftop, digging in the same with the gangster leaning up. And we ain't coming down, see on my face that smile, see on my head that smile, top of the world, top of the town, baby.
I moved up the hood that had the church on the corner where I sit and talk shit all day cause I wanna. And on top of that, wasn't none of y'all gonna do nothing but keep running your mouth and keep frontin'. Go ahead and say something, I'll wait. I ain't gonna wait too late, cause in a minute I'ma escape, cause there is no debate. No, it's not an option. You gotta keep the cock watch.
Sunroof top, digging in the same with the gangster leaning up. And we ain't